Welcome to Elevate. I'm so happy you're here with me today, and I cannot wait to share this episode with you. As an evidence-based coach, mentor, and entrepreneur, I'm obsessed with learning and personal development as it's transformed my entire life, as well as those I get to work with. And to be quite frank, it's literally the entire reason this podcast exists, to fuel your growth, gain perspective, and acquire knowledge. So buckle up, friends. You're in for a treat. And as always, thank you for supporting me and the show so we can continue to elevate our own lives as well as those you share this with. Now, let's get into it. What's up, friend? And welcome back to another episode of Elevate. I'm really excited to start having these conversations. I've been asked in my story a lot about my story and some of the way that I think or how I've come to become the person that I am. And instead of sitting here talking about me, I feel like it would be a lot more beneficial if I shared some of my story to help you guys overcome the problems that you're facing or the struggles that you're having in your life. I can't say I know what it's like to walk in your shoes because I don't, but I can speculate that I've had a similar experience in my life or been through something that evoked a similar emotional response. And I can share how I overcame that. And so what I've done in my stories and in my newsletter, if you guys aren't subscribed, I'll leave a link below. But also I'll leave a link below this episode here because I have no problem coming on here and, giving you guys advice. And I prefer to do it that way. But sitting here talking about myself just doesn't feel right to me. I don't want to just sit and talk about myself. That makes me a little bit uncomfortable. So instead, what I've done today is I've pulled a few questions that a few of you guys have submitted, and I'm going to walk through those and share some of the things that have helped me solve those problems. So I'm just going to get right into it. And the first question, it's really more of a comment, but I'm going to expand on the feedback a little bit. And it says, thought yesterday's masterclass was very on point. It was well put together and easy to understand on what it takes to build a better relationship, not only with food, but within yourself. How did you do that on your own journey? What did you struggle with? So first and foremost, if you guys don't know, we do run masterclasses in my free Facebook group. I'll leave a link below for you guys to join if you're interested in learning more. Again, there's no catch. I just enjoy helping other people. And so you're more than welcome to join along with other women and men who are learning and taking control of their lives in their health and fitness. So with my relationship with food, when I was a kid, I was an athlete. And to this day, the one identity that I hold and I cherish is being an athlete. It helped me so much growing up. It was the one outlet that I had that gave me permission to take the energy that I was channeling in as a kid. Not to say that I was angry. I never acted out. My mom raised me to be, a good kid, but that doesn't mean I didn't have my own emotional struggles, especially my dad was not a part of my life. I don't remember him at all in my childhood. He and my mother had split when I was very young. My older brother and sister, who were only 10 months older than me, were in preschool. So it's not that I have clear memories of him. And I always wanted a dad. This is where people joke around about daddy issues, but I do believe there's some truth to that, at least in my experiences. And instead of, being an angry kid and acting out and breaking rules and doing stuff like that, luckily my brother was kind of that figure for me. I always looked up to him and I always wanted his approval. And he and I were close. And so after school, we would go to the gym and he taught me to play basketball. He taught me to throw a football. He taught me to run routes because he was a quarterback. So I'd always do, all the different things to help him. And instead of getting into trouble or doing other things, I just really found a nice outlet for myself in sports. And so growing up, my mom would call me the vacuum cleaner. I never had a problem with food. I also never had a problem with my weight until I got into competing, which I'll address in a moment. But I could eat anything I wanted. My mom was so good about, we didn't have sodas and stuff in the house outside of what my mom would drink. My mom was a Diet Coke fanatic. She still is to this day. But we had milk and water. And then if we went out to eat or something like that, she'd let us have, a Friendly's milkshake or, something fun. my mom worked multiple jobs when I was a kid. So after school, it was like you get into trouble or you go to an after school program. And we all went to after school programs. And for me, it was the athletic ones. So I did gymnastics, I did basketball, I played with my brother with football. I ended up playing soccer, and then my coach pushed me on the ground and I kicked him in the nuts. And that was the end of my soccer career. Played field hockey, ran track, did softball. So I was always just a craving athletics. That was my thing. And as I got older, I can tell you, my mom never demonized food. I know that she had some of her own struggles with the things that she went through, and I won't speak for her. But she never talked about dieting. She never talked about insecurity. She never talked about body image. She was just one of those people that led by example. She would work, she'd come home, she'd run. My mom is a marathon runner. She's incredible. And she loved running. That was her outlet. So I always saw a really good example of, despite how stressful things are, you make time for yourself because it's good for you to take care of you. And that example was good for me to integrate into my psyche at a young age. And so it wasn't until I got older, especially, I wouldn't say even in college, when I went to play Division I basketball, we were training so much, I actually started dropping weight a lot. And we had a team nutritionist who just made sure that I was eating enough. Because I dropped my first preseason 10 pounds. And it wasn't intentional. I wasn't dieting, counting calories. I was just working out so much. And my body naturally has an anorectic effect to exercise, meaning that it suppresses my appetite instead of increases it, at least the day of, while the next day I tend to experience an elevated sense of hunger. So I never had a problem with food or exercise until I competed. And I didn't necessarily recognize it was happening. And this is why I talk a lot about psychology and physiology and how they're much more integrated than people will discuss. And fair enough, especially if you're in the industry coaching people on aesthetics, right? Your expertise isn't psychology. But at the same time, I remember, long story short, I tore my knee. It ended my career. I was fucking depressed. That was the lowest moment of my life. And that's where everything changed. And so I took up another sport that would basically be a 24/7 job. So I went from playing Division I basketball, where literally your day is scheduled from 4 a.m. until 9 p.m., every day, rinse and repeat. And I took on bodybuilding because I needed something to fill up my time, because what I was doing was avoiding some of the things that I had been through in my past that I hadn't found peace with. And if you've listened to Josh and I's podcasts, you'll hear us talk about in one of the recent ones, kind of the spectrum of heartbreak. And you have narcissists, you have 80% of people that are I can acknowledge what I did wrong, but I'm cool with it, wish you the best. Then you have severe empaths, which basically internalize a lot of things. And even if it's not their fault, they think it's their fault. And that I fall very strongly into that category. But I was trying to, with that understanding, I took a lot of the things that I felt were my fault, or the embarrassment, I would say, the guilt and the shame that I carried after walking away from a very abusive relationship. And I used that with sport and exercise and restriction, right? So it was a really bad equation that down the road would have been, and it was inevitably distracting to my own health. So I never really had issues with food until after I competed. And again, I didn't really notice that they were issues because they were justifiable, right? So one of the things one of my first coaches told me was, if you eat fat, you'll be fat. So I just cut all fat on my diet, which is horrible. Don't do that, please. But I just believed blindly that if I ate fat, I would get fat. And so maybe I had fat because I was eating fat in my diet. So I'm okay, that makes sense. And I just cut it all out. Down the road, that was very detrimental. But even post-competing, I would never eat things like salmon. I wouldn't eat high-fat meat. I would trim meticulously all of the fat off of anything. I wouldn't add anything like avocado. I wouldn't eat nuts or seeds. I was very anti-fat. And it wasn't even something that I felt restricted by. It was just an active choice. And so when I talk about my relationship with food, I also understand most people don't have the relationship that I do with it, because I'm not somebody who's fixated on food. I could care less. I really don't have any pulls or temptations to food. It doesn't take up any of my mindset anymore. When it did, it was mostly just because I was so hungry.
But I got very comfortable with the feeling of hunger, which is really fucked up in some way, shape, or form. But like hunger pains were normal to me. And so it was a normal day, like starving yourself, normal day, cool, which is not good. But nonetheless, it became a conditioned situation for me, and I was fine with it. After competing, I remember one of my best friends, I talk about him all the time. I call him Cooter, but you guys will know him as Jordan. And I remember him telling me one day, and he's so good at pointing something out that you could take offense to, but not making it offensive. So he had pointed out to me one day, because we both live in Dallas, and we were both downtown at the time. And he had just told me, like, I think you should probably walk away from this. Like, I know you at your best, and you're not that. And I noticed that, like, because he and I would go out to eat like once a week. We always had a good time. We talk about life and business and relationships, and he knows me better than most people. And he was like, I even noticed when you're with me, there's just certain things you won't eat. And I wasn't necessarily aware of that because it had just become a habit. It was like, you just don't eat that. But I was never fixated on the fact that I couldn't eat it. I never told myself I couldn't. I just chose not to. And he really brought that to the surface. And I was like, you know what? Maybe I do feel some type of way about these foods because I just avoided them, but I never really thought about it. And so I started working them into my diet. And I was like, all right, well, if I'm going to overcome this, and if it is a fear that I have, I want to make sure that I face it head on. And so every day I would have a food that I had not eaten. So I would add avocado to my meals. I would have beef. I would have salmon. I would have steaks. I would have all that stuff. Because again, for the longest time, I was eating like chicken tenderloin and green beans. Like that was my diet. Please don't do that. But that's where I recognized that I felt some type of way doing it. And the only way out of that was through it. The only way I could overcome any fear of any food or any weird feeling around a food or the idea that if I ate it, it would make me fat was by just eating it and watching the evidence. And the evidence suggested you're just fine. And so that's how I overcame that. It wasn't anything. I am really good at compartmentalizing my emotions. So one really interesting thing that I'll probably talk to Josh about next time we chat is I think people who are highly empathetic, because I have a few clients that fall into that category as well, they tend to compensate with intellect. And I think some of that comes from not trusting my emotions, or they put me in bad situations to the point where it's like, you feel that way, but you shouldn't feel that way, right? Last time you felt that way, you got fucked. So let's not get fucked this time. Like, let's avoid that. And so I think a lot of my mental fortitude comes from being able to dissociate from my emotions. And I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is a thing. My ability to just face that stuff was like, fuck how you feel. Like, you need to do it, go do it. And I did it. And so that's the only way out was through. And you guys have, if you've listened to me for long enough, you know that I say that quite frequently. When you have a fear, it's like the only way to overcome it is to face it head on. So that's the first question. What is something that you're desiring to add to your life in this moment? What's something you're working to let go of? Something I'm desiring to add into my life. What's funny, so it's a Saturday morning, and I'm podcasting because I actually woke up looking through some of these messages, and that one kind of hit me. And I think the one thing that I crave is a companion, someone to do life with, someone who's truly got my back, someone who would go to war with me. Like, I think I crave that. That's something that I struggle with. I think that's also why I tend to work as much as I do. And I'm not one of those people that's going to sit on here and drum my ego being like, oh, I worked so much. Like, no, like I just work because when I enjoy it, I get lost in my work. I genuinely love what I do. At the same time, it's a great excuse to not put myself out there because the work has utility and I'm aware of that. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying it is. And so I think that's the one thing I would love to add is like someone to wake up to, someone to have my back, someone to be my rock on my hardest days, somebody that's on my side, that's got my back, that's with me through it. And a lot of that comes down to making sure their values and their morals and their vision are at least aligned with mine. They don't have to be the same. But I get messages in especially my anonymous, about dating and are you accepting boyfriend applications and, all this stuff. And I think while there are beautiful humans on the internet, for sure, what I found is the people that I found the deepest connections of love with are people that are not the people that I would be instantly attracted to on the internet. And so for me, it's knowing that as evidence and going like, I don't want a stranger who doesn't know me or has taken the time to know me, who basically wants to date me or whatever based on how I look, or, I have to only go with surface level options here. But none of that stuff is appealing to me. I want somebody who I know believes in commitment the way that I do, who has a similar moral compass, who has the same levels of ambition and intellect, and somebody who believes in commitment and takes that seriously. And I'll wait for that. I'm patient. I love hanging out with myself. I have a good old time, but there are definitely moments where that can become very lonely. And I won't ever lie about that. There are many entrepreneurs that I know that on social media, you'd think they were having the best life ever. And their personal life outside of their business stuff is empty. And I think that that's sad. And I also can say I know what that feels like. So that's one thing that I would desire. It's not a need. It's definitely a desire, but one I think is close to a need, right? We all need human connection. Something that I'm working on letting go of. You guys are making me get vulnerable here. I feel like the whole theme of my year has been let go, which is interesting because the word that I picked for this year was heart. I pick a word every year. It just sets my intentions on things. And it's been a year ago right now, I'd be falling in love with somebody. And the leading back to kind of that empath period, that empath character trait that I haven't let go of that, if I'm being honest. It's definitely gotten better. Like there are days and weeks I don't think about him at all. But there are moments, especially as it's gotten closer to like when it all started, which would be now. I've had more nightmares about it. I find myself feeling it. And again, my feelings don't really impact my behavior. So I show up and I do what I need to do every single day. But if I could find a way to just let go of that, that would be super awesome. Like nobody likes the feeling of heartbreak. But I think the one thing I'd like to let go of is just internalizing people's anger, because when people are upset, they say things that maybe they don't mean, and words cut like a knife. That's why I try to always tell people, think it through before you say something, because once you say it, you can't unsay it. It's kind of like dieting down and getting shredded. I've talked about my body image issues before, but once you see yourself that way, you can't unsee it. Once you know something, you can't unknow it, right? And so it's just, I tend to hold on to that, and I wish I could let that go, So I would say that's something on a personal level that I'm working to let go of. Not easy. And Josh and I are going to do a podcast around heartbreak because I think a lot of people struggle with it. But the only thing that I can say is time, which is not a great answer. It's not sexy. But I'm also somebody who I would feel very guilty being with somebody else if my heart was still with somebody else. I know a lot of people are like, the best way to get over somebody is to get under somebody else, but that's not, I can't do that. I'm also I won't talk too much about that stuff, but it's not my thing. Let's just say that. How do I go through my schedule to set myself up for success in my health routines? So I think the first and most important thing for most people to understand is that in order for you to achieve a different outcome, you have to start doing different things. And if we can accept that to be true, which would mean that you have to stop doing certain things that you are doing. And this is why I say balance doesn't exist. I know people get pissed at me when I say it and they're like, everybody wants balance. I don't mean it that way. But think about a teeter-totter. Okay. If we're talking about balance, something that is balanced would be equal distribution. When you want to move the needle in one direction or another, that teeter-totter needs to tilt, right? Which means certain things have to come down a little bit so that something else can go up. And what you'll also find is that you work better at a different distribution of items, right? So for me, the best thing that I've ever done is have a schedule, first and foremost. But before I can even set my schedule, I have to look at myself and go, what are all the things on my to-do list? All of them. All of the things I haven't done, but they're on my to-do list. And I pick 3 of them. Like, what are the biggest main priorities that only I can do that need to be done now? And I circle them. I look at the list again and I go, can I delegate any of these things? If I can, I delegate them. Everything else, I just cross out. Because one of the things that drives anxiety or stress is having tons of open loops. And they're always going to be open. And for those of you that are going to try to push back and be like, but they need to be done. Guess what? They're not being done right now anyways. You can keep them there if you want to, but they're still not going to get done. Right? And if you have no focus of priorities, nothing's going to move. And you're going to wake up every day stressed about all the open loops that you continue to have on your to-do list. Whereas if you break it down into digestible tidbits and you check the boxes on those 3 things, guess what? Now you have room for 3 more things and you can start getting stuff done. So finding out where your priorities are in your life is important, first and foremost, because you can't make any decision until you have clarity on which direction is most important for you to travel, at least right now. Remember, this is not a permanent thing, right? Everything in life is fluid. And so what your priorities are in this season now doesn't mean they're your priorities in the next season of your life. Just remember, it's not black and white and it's not concrete. So finding priorities first, and then you have to look at what are things I am committed to doing. That should be your workouts. That should be your meal prep. That should be your exercise, right? That should be your cardio. That should be, those types of things. Okay. So those are the things that we're adding. Now we have to look at what we're taking away, which people hate, but it's true. You need to do this. You got to trim the fat. You just got to get rid of it. That's really bad analogy for what I talked about earlier. I don't mean cut fat out of your diet. Please don't do that. But what you need to do then is go, okay, relative to my daily demands, right? Most of you work jobs, and you're going to have to do that. You're going to have to show up for that. But maybe some of you have really bad boundaries, like you're getting paid to work 40 hours a week, but you're working at home and you're taking it home with you. Like, shout out to COVID for making everybody's life more stressful. You need to set boundaries around your work. And you need to go, okay, I'm getting paid to work 8 hours a day. I'm doing everything I need to do, which means when you're in your office, guys, like, one of the other things I'll talk about productivity is so many people waste time scrolling their fucking phone. Like, if you're at work and you're scrolling on your phone and you're on social media, unless that is your job, you shouldn't be doing it. That's why you're so behind with work, and that's why you're taking it home with you, because you're not actually being productive during the day. So, like, one thing I've done in my office, I don't bring my phone in here other than right now because I have questions on my phone. But during my work days, I don't have notifications on my desktop. I don't have my phone in my office. I'm working and getting shit done. Because if I had my phone in here, I would pick it up. That thing is the most addictive thing we have. We talk about all the other addictions. That phone is an addiction. And so you're going to be compelled to pick it up, to scroll it, to check, to look at blah, blah, blah. Right? If you're worried about somebody calling you guys, put your phone on loud. But keep it outside of your workspace. Keep it in your purse. Keep your purse hanging on the back of your door. Don't touch it. And you'll get a lot more done in your workday, and then you won't have to bring your work home. So, like, there's one solution to that. But outside of that, if you have extra projects you're taking on, if you're taking on other stuff, if you're saying yes because you feel bad saying no, you're going to have to learn to start saying no to things. Because the reason that you aren't making time is because you're putting your needs behind everybody else's needs, which over a long enough time horizon makes you resentful. So let's avoid doing that. Let's trim the fat for now in this season so you can start to become a better version of yourself. Because what you also don't recognize is that when you're chronically stressed and you aren't taking care of yourself, you aren't showing up as your best. You're just conditioned to believe this is normal, right? But what if your baseline level is a C and you're just like, this is A, I'm at A, but truly you're C. You just don't know because you don't know different. And so what you'll notice is as you start to prioritize yourself and your health, your confidence radiates, your energy increases, your productivity expands, you're doing better work, which is giving you back more time. Interestingly enough, right? That's why they always say discipline is freedom. Because once you have systems and you actually start progressing and you get shit done, you start to get time back, right? And then you don't have to worry about all the decisions that you need to make because you have clarity on the vision. And when you have clarity on a vision, it tells you what do you need to say no to, which is anything that doesn't bring you closer to that. And so you have to remember that in order to achieve different, you have to start doing different, which means you're going to have to add new things. And the only way to add things without stress is to remove things that aren't necessary for you to be doing right now. So that is what I would look at, is literally pull up a calendar, look at all of, make a list of all your things, find clarity on what's most important. What is your priority in the season right now? What are the daily non-negotiable things that you have to get done because you don't have a choice? How can you expand your productivity in those situations? And then what do you need to remove? What do you need to say no to? What do you need to say not right now because this is my priority and I simply just don't have time? Because again, if you say yes to something and you're spread thin and then you produce something that's shit, that's a reflection of you, right? So you have to be careful of what you say yes to. If it's not going to be your best, don't do it. Ooh. As a competitive athlete, what helped you walk away from competing? This is a really interesting question. I feel like I've had a lot of calls recently from competitors who really are just looking to find peace in the decision to walk away from the sport, which that will tell you a lot about how much pressure is in that industry to stay there. Now, I'm not somebody who demonizes it. I had fun while I did it. It served whatever purpose it needed to for me at the time. I wouldn't say it was the healthiest thing. I would not recommend anybody do it the way that I had done it because that was not good for me long term. But when it comes to this, I think a lot of people, you can be an athlete without competing. Like really, you can. I would say you can be a better athlete without competing. And the reason that I say that, again, bodybuilders, I would say there's certainly one of the most disciplined specimens you'll ever meet, but somewhere close to a disorder. And not everybody, and I'm not claiming everybody is. There are people that have no problems with any of it at all. But there are a majority of people who do. And again, it filled its purpose. And I'm never going to say never. People ask me, are you never going to compete again? I'm like, I don't know. My life changes. I might change my mind. I have the right to do that. So I can't say I will never compete again. But I also have to look at what are the priorities in my life. And I'll tell you a small story that was one of the big things that kind of manifested that decision. One, when you're lean and shredded, you're not somebody who can perform very well as far as athletic performance is concerned. And again, you have to remember, I was always a team sport athlete. I was always focused on power and explosiveness and speed and agility. That made me feel like an athlete. You can't do that in bodybuilding. Your joints, tissue is smaller. You have basically no fat on you to be able to do power performance. Look at explosive movements and agilities. You can get injured doing that stuff. So for me, like that was one of the things I knew I was getting burnt out on, is like, I can't even do a fucking box jump the way that I used to. It was just like, what the hell? So I didn't like that. I didn't like that feeling. But one of the biggest things, I've told this story before. I think it was on my masterclass, and I've told this to clients too on calls who've struggled with this similar thing. But I remember my grandmother. She was one of those like home bakers. Like she would make everything from scratch, everything. And every Thanksgiving and Christmas, she'd make pies, and I'm talking like 8 to 10 varieties of pies, and they were beautiful, and everybody said they were delicious. And every year she'd ask me to have a piece of her pie. And because I competed back to back for years, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. I think I took a long off season somewhere in there, but pretty repetitively nonetheless. And so every year I'd tell her, next year, Grandma, next year I'll do it. Next year I'll have a pie with you. And she'd be like, okay, Caitlin. She was always so patient. And one year I went home for Christmas, and I was like, okay, this year I'll have Grandma's pie. I'll work it in this year. And before I made it home, in the middle of the night, my grandmother had woken up, and she went down into the basement, and she ended up falling down the stairs and cracking open her skull, and she died. And I remember that holiday. My mom, bless her heart, she had gotten her recipes because my dad, it was my dad's mom who had passed, my stepdad, technically, but he is the best dad I could have ever asked for. He loved her pies. Like, he my mom will try to bake, but she's no Charlotte. Like Charlotte had it. So my mom was like, okay, I'm going to make these because she loves my dad more than anything. Well, not as much as she loves her kids, but she loves my dad. And I remember sitting there with a piece of pie that my mom had made and wondering what my grandmother's tasted like because I had no frame of reference. And I was like, why am I sacrificing those moments that I will never get back just to weigh a certain amount, just to hold on to this ego, just to hold on to this, you're disciplined, echo chamber. And that was one of the things I was like, is it worth it? I'll never have that memory. I'll never have it. I have the memories of watching my families enjoy it and how happy she would be at how much they loved it. But I don't have that memory. And then I started thinking about all the other memories I don't have. And do I want to continue not to have them? And so that for me was like, it doesn't have to be that way. I want fitness that fits. You guys will hear me say that all the time when I talk about why Strong Fit Free exists. Because fitness that works for a bodybuilder in their lifestyle and what they love doesn't necessarily work for people who want to be present with their kids or stay-at-home moms or, people who value family and experiences, business owners who travel and go out to events and endeavors and, all of that stuff. It's different. And I think finding fitness that fits in a dietary structure that works best for you, that you can sustain long-term, right? If you can't do it for a day, there's no point in doing it for a decade is something that I'll also say. And I think that has truth to it. And so for me, one, bodybuilding doesn't make me an athlete. That's the first thing. Two, I can be highly competitive in a lot of things. It doesn't have to be bodybuilding. Three, I can still be athletic and compete in different arenas in fitness. That's not bodybuilding. So for me, it has nothing to do with being an athlete. It had a lot to do with the cost of competing. And I don't mean financial, though it is an expensive hobby. It was my health. I lost that. I was living on a pot of coffee a day. I mean, like a whole ass pot of coffee just to survive. Like that was my baseline. My hormones were tanked. I know I mentioned this on my story if you guys follow me on Instagram, but I just got my period back. That's been a few years in the making, and there's a lot of context to that. I can do a podcast on kind of how I got that back, and no, it wasn't hiring a functional medicine person and spending thousands of dollars on supplements. I actually got it back after I stopped doing all that mess. So it was costing me more than it was giving me. I mean, that the net was negative for me. I had a lot of, again, there's psychological adaptations with restriction. A lot of mood stuff comes from that. You'll see people become highly neurotic, significantly more anxious. I definitely was very anxious during those points in my life because I was fucking shredded. My body's like, what the hell are you doing? So yeah, I think for certain people that don't have discipline or like haven't pushed themselves to achieve a really ambitious goal, I think it will teach you a lot. But I know looking back, if I'm being honest with myself, I didn't need to do that. I risked my whole life to go play Division I basketball, which was a pipe dream. Like I didn't need another ounce of knowing that I had the willingness to suffer through stuff. I had proven that to myself enough, and I prove that to myself every day. Like suffering by choice is better than suffering by consequence. And that is something that I am conscious of in my day-to-day of choosing my regrets and choosing my own suffering, because I'd rather have a say in what it is than bite the consequences of not self-selecting it, because there's always going to be pain and suffering. And I think that's something that many people don't conceptualize, because what you don't recognize by not prioritizing it now is that you're just delaying it. And I would say most people, especially in regard to their health, right? You're delaying it, but you're also increasing the gravity in which it will be debilitating to you. Whereas if now you were to prioritize it, invest in it, take care of it, learn the things you need to learn so that you can handle that later down the road, right? You're avoiding a lot of heartache. You're avoiding a lot of financial stress because medical bills are ridiculous. So it's all about thinking about the suffering that you want to self-select. And for me, I can continue to train. I love athletic training. I'm training for a half marathon now. I'm going to run one with my mom next year, on top of doing my own little mini cut, which is fun for me. I like being in the gym. I like being able to change different training. You know, I got really burnt out on hypertrophy style training. I didn't want to do 4 sets of 12 anymore. So I got back into, you know, functional training and performance. And that's been really fun for me. So I think you just have to remember that you can be competitive without being a bodybuilding athlete. And the other thing I'll say, like I said from the beginning, is it's not a forever thing. If you want to go back to it, you can go back to it. It's not like once you walk away, you're done. You know, some people make it really dramatic, like I'm hanging up my heels, and then they'll be back in the sport 2 years later. It's like, just say you're taking time off. That's cool, you know, but you don't have to make a concrete decision because people change their mind all the time, and you're likely to do so as well. I'm struggling with love handles. I'm doing everything right, but the stubbornness of the fat is still here. Yes, the body needs fat for energy and other sources of nutrients and helping keep the body warm. Still, it's a great challenge to burn them off. One thing that I'll say, and this is why I hate marketing, and I'm not going to go on a marketing rant because I could, and I have a lot to say about it. Here's the thing, okay? First of all, women are going to store body fat differently than men due to our hormonal distribution difference. Okay. You don't get to pick where you lose body fat from. Every single diet I've ever done, I lose body fat differently. Even this time, it's very different, right? And so you don't get to pick where you lose fat from. The goal is just you lose fat. And you don't lose your health in the process of obsessing over the scale or of your waistline. Because, like, listen, Linda, you only get one body, and treating it like shit removes the functionality of it. Like, one of the things I see all the time, because everything is so visual now with social media, people will sit there and be like, oh, I didn't want to post this video because, you know, my stomach while I'm doing deadlifts. It's like, instead of demonizing your body for how it looks during a movement, why don't you have gratitude for the fact that your body can even deadlift? Because some people can't do that, like functionally so. And so it's like appreciating your body for what it can do more than what it looks like while it's doing it. It's like, at least you can be grateful for that. So that's one of my biggest pet peeves. But other than that, you have to remember, like, you can always get better, but you don't get to control the time horizon in which it happens, right? Many people will get fed up and they'll quit because the results didn't come in the expected timeline in which they set for themselves. It's like, you don't get to decide that if you do hamstring curls every single day, that in 8 weeks, your hamstrings are going to be twice the size. It's like, you're delusional. You know nothing about growth. And I'm assuming here, like, I don't condone PEDs. If you want to do TRT, HRT, consult with a professional. But if we're talking about natural rates of growth, it's like painting a wall, right? It's like watching paint dry. You don't see the layer of paint. It doesn't stand out in a 3-dimensional way. Like, think about muscle fibers being that fine. It's super dense. So you could be constructing tissue, and guess what? It's not going to be visible to the eye. And so you just have to know that if you lose fat and you continue to train, which is a part of losing fat, not just weight, your body will continue to change if you stay consistent with it and you understand training intensity and overload. And I'm not going to break that down here, but I will drop a nugget that I am launching something very special that will break a lot of this stuff down, that will give you guys a lot of education on how you can start to achieve your goals without running ragged, following restrictive plans or a meal plan, or telling yourself you can't have foods and this and that. It'll also break down training. And one of the models that I use in my business that works very, very well for 99% of people, I would say 100% of people, but maybe not everybody would try it. So there you go. But you have to remember that you just stay consistent. You don't get to control where you lose fat, and you have to accept that. You can be mad at it all you want to, but what is that thought useful? Is that energy being mad about what your body, where it's choosing to lose fat? Is that useful? No. So stop doing it. Right? It's like, whenever I have a mental midget moment and I have these thoughts, like, I'll bring them out and I'll look at them and I'll be like, one, is it true? Most of the time it's not, because our brains run wild. And number two, is it useful? If it's not useful, stop thinking about it, because I can tell myself that's not fucking useful to you. It's not moving you in any direction. You're just sitting here beating yourself up or ruminating over something that has nothing to do with the now. So what next? What now? Then you move and you just take action and you do what you need to do to get you closer to where you want to be. Best podcast for fitness, life, motivation beside yours, obviously. So I'll tell you guys a secret. I don't actually listen to other fitness podcasts. I don't really consume other fitness content. And the reason that I do that is, one, I think we have a large enough sounding board on the internet of people just regurgitating ideas. And some ideas are so good they should be shared. But a lot of the things that I consume are outside of that arena entirely. And what I like about that is I can take something that somebody that I look up to says. Like, for example, I'll listen to people in business. I'll listen to people who are really good at copywriting. I'll listen to people who are really good at communication. I'll listen to people who, my favorite thing to listen to and read is mostly philosophy and psychology. And so those are the things that if I consume anything, it's something that's helping me learn. And I can take what I've learned in the principles, because my brain works in a way in which I can observe something and boil it down to the principle. And when I boil it down to the principle, I can then carry it over and create something in my arena under my own kind of values and belief systems in my business or within my own thoughts, and then cultivate something different. And so I think when it comes to my advice on those things, I don't have other fitness podcasts really. And if I do listen to a podcast, I'll say I really appreciate Chris Williamson and what he's doing, especially because he and I are both very into evolutionary psychology. As a psych student, one of the disciplines that I'm very interested in, and one that I've studied, is evolutionary psychology. And I think that fits very well in the fact that I have a scientific background. But I really like those episodes with David Buss. He's like a leader in evolutionary psych, so I read a lot of his stuff. So again, you can see, like, it's not really the podcast, it's the person that's speaking and what topic they're on, and I'll kind of, explore that stuff because it piques my interest. So motivational stuff I don't really listen to. I know that sounds weird. Maybe some Alex Hormozy occasionally. I really like what he has to say when I have time to listen to it, but you can see in my office if you're watching this, those are all the books that I've read this year. And a lot of them are like Dostoevsky, Nietzsche, Freud, all of those people. And Dostoevsky, I like old books. I like old wisdom. I like philosophers. I like Carl Jung. I mean, I genuinely enjoy more of that stuff. Jordan Peterson. I will say Jordan Peterson, actually. I don't listen to his stuff a ton, but if I do have a free moment to listen to somebody, I really do like him. I know he's somewhat controversial. I think he's wildly misunderstood some ways, but again, I don't know him personally, so maybe I misunderstand him. That's always a possibility. So I would say those are the types of things that I listen to. Again, I'm not saying you should. Some people really like motivational stuff. Like a couple of my clients really like David Goggins and Andy Frisella, and those people that are just gonna rah. I don't need that. I like stuff more that challenges the way that I think or makes me think differently. So that's how I would answer that. How do you stay motivated, focused, and present for yourself? The only way that I can really explain this that might make sense is I look at myself outside of myself and I parent myself. I know that sounds really weird, but I want to be super transparent. I'm not always motivated to do stuff. I don't always want to get up at 4 a.m., 5 a.m. I don't always want to do that. I don't always want to go to the gym. I don't always want to run. I don't really care about food. So food is food to me. So I don't say I ever have problems with eating what I need to eat. That's no problem to me at all. There's no resistance to that whatsoever in my brain. But I don't think about what I want to do. I think about what's best for me. And so it's like, you might not want to go to the gym, but it's best for you to do that instead of staying here. It's best for you to go for a run than it's better for you to go for a run and improve your cardiovascular health, improve your fitness, right? Get prepared for the half marathon you're going to run, then sit on your ass and not do it because you don't want to, right? So I think for me, it's just, I'm very good at forcing myself to do stuff I don't want to do. I mean, honestly, I think that doesn't sound great. It's not a sexy answer. I don't have some beautiful motivational thing to say to you other than you have to treat yourself like you're somebody that you're responsible for taking care of, because you are. And nobody else is going to look out for you the way that you need to. You're the only person that's with you 24 hours a day. And so if you really want to set yourself up to be successful in pursuing whatever it is that you find meaningful, and again, I really think the majority of people should sit down and define words on their own terms. Like, what does success mean to you? What does winning mean to you? What would your life have to look like in order for you to be satisfied with it? If you can get clear on that stuff, then you'll know the things that you need to be doing if you're really looking out for yourself and your best interest and increasing the opportunity of that outcome for yourself. Then you'll know what you need to do. And then at that point, it's just a choice. And I choose that every day. That to me is most important. is choosing that, the type of person that I want to be, how I want to show up in the world, the things that I want to challenge myself with, where I want to grow, the things that I want to learn and be able to apply and carry over and observe. All of that stuff. I love a challenge. I'm comfortable being challenged. I'm very uncomfortable not being challenged by something. I've over time, again, this isn't all stuff that I like woke up one day and was like, oh my God, this is how I think. It's like, no, I hit rock bottom in my life and I had to choose to sit there and make excuses and be a victim and take the easy path and just blame other people, or I had to investigate myself and figure out, who I was outside of what I did. Like that was the biggest thing, is I always associated my value with my ability to do things. Right? I thought I was good enough once I made my dreams come true. But that's not where the value comes. It's funny that I can say that now, but in the pursuit of it, I didn't know. Right? But most people wouldn't be willing to take the risks that I did. Most people wouldn't be willing to sleep on an air mattress and work at Dave & Buster's while they're trying to learn a skill and take a year off from school. Most people wouldn't take that risk. Right? And some people ask me, why? Why would you do that? What made you do that? And it's this one quote, and I don't know who said it, and I don't even know if it was said at the time, but it was a similar train of thought, where hell is the place you meet the person that you could have been. And like, that terrifies me. I don't want to look back on my life knowing that I played it safe. I don't want to not have a good story to tell. Because I'm the one that has to live with all that stuff. It's like when your day is repetitive and it's Groundhog's Day and it's boring, it's like, I don't want a life like that. So whenever I feel compelled to do something, so long as it's in alignment with my future vision and my morals and my values, and it can make me better while it might be challenging and scary, I'm going to do it. Right? That's the promise that I made to myself. Right? It doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. Most people won't understand that. That's fine. That's okay. I'm not telling you to be like me. But those are the things that I think through. It's like, what is the net of this choice? Net positive or net negative? What is your worst case scenario? Can you live with that? If yes, go do it. And it's a quick filter system that allows me to make decisions quickly and rationally in ways that I know align with who I am, what I want, where I want to go, the person that I want to become. So I would say those are kind of some of my thoughts and frames and how I think through these things. Lastly, last question. I know this is getting to the hour here. What major life moments shifted your mental mindset to where it is now? I will try to give you the Cliff Notes here, because this would be a whole ass, probably 3-hour podcast, honestly, and I would need somebody to ask me questions because, again, I don't like just diving in and talking about me. I want to make sure it gives you value. But I'll say, first thing, from a young age, my father walking out of my life. That definitely impacted me. My mother is one of the most incredible human beings. Like, I'm really hoping to get her to come to an event and speak. I don't think she'll do it, but if I can force her to get there, like surprise her, like get her down there and just like pull her on stage, like, you guys will have to help me. Lisa. I think you guys would benefit from hearing her, because it would help you make sense of why I am the way that I am. Like, she has been the template of my life. We have very different beliefs. We have very different ideas around certain terms of fulfillment and joy and success and safety and security and those types of things. Fair enough. But her example for me, like, I could cry if you're watching this video. Her example for me, she is every good part of me I got from my mom. I give her all of that. My ambition, my drive, my stubbornness, my mental fortitude, my willingness to show grace, my ability to forgive, loving unconditionally, challenging myself, pursuing education. She told me from a very young age, Caitlin, knowledge is power. Knowledge is power. And I didn't know what that meant, but she made it like a superhero, because I always wanted to be like Tomb Raider. I thought she was dope. Or like, if you guys ever watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that was like my show growing up. That will tell you something about me. I always wanted to be my own superhero. And so if I could have a power, and my mom was telling me that knowledge would be that power, right? I could play that out. And so I really got into knowledge. I was super scientific, I've always been ridiculously curious. Even as a kid, my grandma would get so fucking annoyed because I wanted to know everything about everything, why everybody was the way that they were, why they behaved the way that they did, why that relationship was going the way that it did, why certain people acted certain ways. Like, again, that speaks to now the manifestation of my second master's degree. But I would say that my mom set a really good example for me, right? Because raising 3 children at the age of 23 by yourself, broke, working 3 jobs, prioritizing your health, never missing a game, never not being there for dinner. Like, I can't fathom what that took. And my mom's one of those people you will never see her sweat. The coolest thing about my mom, I'm telling you, this has got to be a gift. There could be I'm just going to use a really bad example in the context of the world, and I don't mean this to this has no association with what's going on, but as the example I would give is like, there could be a bomb under your bed, and my mom could come in there, and she would wake you up in the middle of the night, and she'd be like, "Hey babe, we're gonna go for a drive, we're gonna go see the Christmas lights, you want to go see that, you want to go see Santa?" And she'd get you out of bed, cool as a cucumber. She wouldn't rush you, she wouldn't be in a panic, she'd get you in the car and you'd leave, and you would have no idea what the fuck just happened. But she would know, fucking thank God there was a bomb under that bed. Like, she has the ability in the highest of stressful moments to be very calm. Like, it is a gift. And I won't give personal examples of that. That's why I needed to use a metaphor or example, because I've seen her do it in real life. I just don't want to tell those stories because they're not mine to tell. But I think just having the right template is really important. And again, having clarity and knowing who I am. Like, I spent a lot of time figuring out who I was. I remember telling my mom after I tore my knee, sitting on the couch depressed as a motherfucker, I need to figure out who I am. And I don't know if that will be my life's work, but I need to know. I need to understand the way that I tick so that I can control it. Right? Because I wanted to be in control of me. And so I needed to figure out who I was, what I wanted, what my values were, what my mission was, what I wanted to be remembered for, what type of person I wanted to become, what things I found fulfillment in. Right? I've said this before on a podcast, but one thing that really helped me sort this out was truly immersing myself into the idea that everything in life is meaningless. And then self-selecting what it was in life that meant something to me. And growth, personal growth, physical growth, psychological growth, emotional growth, all those things, growing as a person means a lot to me. I love intellectually challenging things. I fucking love it. I can get immersed in that. I love conversations. I love dialogues. I love having disagreements with ideas, and sorting through that stuff. Like, for me, that's so fun. And the second thing is contribution. I love helping people. My whole goal when I started this business, first of all, I never set out to build a business. I was never one of those people that was like, I'm an entrepreneur. I was like, fuck, I have a choice to make. Which one can I live with? I aim to be the person that I wish that I had. Right? I had to sort this shit out on my own, which means I made a lot of mistakes in the process. Right? And if I can help other people find fulfillment in their life and reach their own actualization of the self and live out loud, as people would tell me that I do, then I would say I've been successful. And those are the things that keep me moving. If I'm comfortable, or if I think I know more than I do, because the more that I learn, the more I realize I know nothing at all. Because there are certain things we will never know. So you always have to keep your mind open to changing your opinion, which is why you can't have a belief so that you hold on so tightly to that it is a part of you, because you aren't what you think. But what you think can manifest into who you are. And so you have to hold your ideas at arm's length, knowing that with new evidence, you would be willing to change your mind. But I would say a lot of those things, and again, like, just having somebody in my life whose life I can't fathom was so fucking, I can't imagine. I really can't imagine going through that at 23. 3 little babies on your own. And you have no choice but to figure out how to survive. And instead of quitting or, living on welfare or whatever she could have done, and no judgment to people who do, she chose to fight. She went to school for over a decade. right? My mom used to work at the post office. Now my mom is the medical director and a doctor at a medical hospital that works with Dartmouth Hitchcock, which I don't know if you talk about rags to riches, but like that's the coolest thing. And that's my mom. Like, and she's the most humble person you'll ever meet. I mean, she's amazing, like amazing. God broke the mold when he made her. That's how I think about her. And she's the one person that I need to think of when I'm having a moment that I'm like, if she can do it, you can do it. And so a lot of the reason that I do what I do is if I can do it, you can do it. Right? Because I'm not special. I'm not in any way. I have my own weaknesses, my own insecurities, my own struggles, right? I'm human. I don't have it all figured out. I don't know if we ever do. But I can share with you what I've learned and how I think through things and how I've navigated stuff and the experiences that I've had in hopes to, one, let you know that you're not alone, and two, to let you know that it's not going to be like this forever. So I hope you guys like this. If you did, let me know. I'll leave a question box below this episode. And if you made it to the end, I appreciate you. I would really appreciate you sharing this episode either on Instagram or with a friend. Subscribe if you're watching on YouTube if you like this content. If not, that's okay. And I'll see you guys in the next episode.